we started today's class by this problem that if we want to repeat a certain part of the code and if we want to do it manually, then first of all the problem is doing manual labor, and second is there are more chances of error. So what we do is we can use loops. So the first structure, repetition structure that we will see here is called the while loop. So how do we write while loop? For solving this particular problem, we can first introduce a variable called count and initialize it to 0, and then we have this while statement. So while, the keyword while, then inside the bracket we have the loop continuing condition. So this statement in the bracket is a loop continuing condition, and just like the conditional statements, the result of this loop continuing condition will always be Boolean, that means true or false. If the result is true, it will enter the loop block and execute and then repeat again. If the continuing condition is false, it will simply ignore the loop body and continue with the next part of the program. So let's look at here, while this count is less than 100. So now the value of count is 0. So 0 less than 100 is true. So it will enter the loop and print welcome to Java. Then we have this count plus plus, that is the update of the loop variable. So by this plus plus, count becomes 1. Then it loops back into the condition and check again if 1 is less than 100, which is again true. So it enters the loop body and print out this line. Again count plus plus, so count becomes 2, and then again it looped back to the continuing condition and check if 2 is less than 100, and so on. When count becomes 100, it checks if 100 is less than 100, which is false. Then it exits the loop and continue with the next part of the program. So we can actually show this using a flowchart. Yes, so the writing is while, the keyword while, and inside the bracket we will write the loop continuing condition, then the brace start or the loop block starts, and we have the loop body, that means whatever statements we want to repeat. At the end there is usually an update of the loop variable. It will depend on the problem though, but usually there is also a statement that updates the loop variable. So that means since it's a condition, so we have this diamond shape where we are checking a condition to be true or false. If the condition result is true, we will have the repeating statement, and after this repeating statement we will loop back into the condition check, and that's why it's called a loop. Okay. If the result is false, we will simply avoid all this and go to the next part of the program. Okay. So now let's trace a program. Okay. Let's look at the next slide. So first we initialize count to be 0, and then we compare if count, which is 0, is less than 2 or not, which is true. So we enter the loop and print welcome to Java. Then we increase count by 1, so count becomes 1, and then we loop back here and again compare if 1 is less than 2, which is true. So we enter the loop and print Java, welcome to Java. Then we again increase count, so count becomes 2, and then we compare if 2 is less than 2, which is false. So since this is false, it will no longer enter the loop and go to the next part of the program. We have seen has a loop control variable, and we know beforehand how many times the loop will repeat. So there are cases where we do not know from before how many times the loop will continue. In that case, we need to end the loop with a particular value, which is called sentinel value. So sentinel value is also known as concluding value or ending value. So often the number of times a loop is executed is not predetermined, and you may use an input value to signify the end of the loop. Such a value is known as a sentinel value. For example, if you we can have an infinite loop like while true, and then inside the loop we can have a specific input marked as maybe we take an input from the user and the user gives -1. So if the condition of the loop is while number or while input number is greater than 0, then the loop continues. And then inside the loop the user inputs the number to be a negative value. Only then the loop will exit, and that negative value will be known as a sentinel value. Okay. For this we need to be careful for some cases. For example, when we deal with floating point number, as I have mentioned before, floating point number is not saved with the exact value, and often they are saved with some approximation. So in the next program where the code is computing 1 plus 0.9 plus 0.8 plus up to like this 0.1, that means the following code or this code is actually adding the values from 1 till 0 every time decrementing by 0.1. So we have the actual value that we will be adding as double item 1, and then we have a double sum equals 0. Then we have the loop that while item is not equal 0. So we are actually accumulating the value of item into sum, and every time we are updating item by subtracting 0.1 from it. Okay, so you see it starts from 1, so 1 not equal 0 is true, so it will enter and it will add 0 to 1 and have the new value 1 assigned into sum. Then items become 1 minus 0.1 or 0.9. So next 0.9 not equal 0 is true, so we again accumulate 0.9 into sum, and then item becomes 0.8. So in this way, when item is 0.1 here and then we subtract 0.1, so 0.1 minus 0.1, we expect the result to be 0. But as we have seen in the previous classes that 0.1 minus 0.1 may not always result with exact 0, maybe an approximate value of 0. So when an approximate value of 0 is compared with 0 to be not equal, that becomes true, and then it again enters the loop, and then it adds that insignificant value to sum, and then item become negative minus or minus 0.1. Then it can never again reach 0. So this becomes an infinite loop. So what we can do is, instead of having this equal or not equal operator comparing for the floating point value, we should use greater than or less than operators when we are dealing with the floating point values.